when it comes to real value behind programmatic transactions and making money on audio, it all comes down to relationships and the people behind it, the like daily nurturing, the daily training and explaining, like we talked about earlier, and informing as well, especially from the publisher, both sides, the buyers and the sellers, like explaining what's happening, the evolutions within the industry, within the technology. So that human component is like a huge part of my day to day.
Hello, and welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, a podcast about the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Belenky of NJB Media, a podcast audience development strategist.
And I'm Kiernan of Podhouse Productions, an all-in-one podcast consultation and editing platform. We're co-hosts on this journey into the world of podcasting as a monetization tool.
Whether you're building branded content, scaling a podcast network, or you're just getting into the podcasting industry, PodBiz breaks down the strategies, tech, and mindset behind podcast success.
We're bringing you insider tips, real talk with industry professionals, strategies that actually work, and talking all about the things that we've seen in the trenches.
So if you're ready to go beyond the downloads and build real impact with your podcast,
then hit subscribe and let's get down to PodBiz.
Welcome to PodBiz. Today we're joined by Rebecca Dalby, VP of Demand at Triton. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Norma Jean. I am very excited and honored to be asked to go on the show.
Likewise, we're thrilled to have you. Well, let's get straight into it. Rebecca, where's the money in podcasting?
I had a feeling you'd ask me this question, not least because I'm an avid listener. But I find it interesting, like you get such varied answers on this question, right? Like depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And also depending on when you ask the question, because the landscape, our industry is just changing so rapidly. So
man, we're on some moving tectonic plates. Yeah.
We are.
We are.
So I love listening to all of the different kind of perspectives, let's say, on this question. But for me, speaking from a demand side and from a programmatic specifically perspective as well, like with podcasting, the money is just in so many different people's pockets, to be honest with you.
Everybody look in your pockets. Do you have money in there?
Everyone look in your pockets. Yeah, for sure. And if you have money in there, give it to the podcasters, and podcasters root through people's pockets. No, but like the most successful ways that I've kind of seen creators or podcasters making money in the industry is really to adapt to like a layered monetization strategy. And I know that might sound like a bit of a cliche answer, but for podcasters to really understand the different revenue streams that they can earn from, from sponsorship, direct sales to programmatic, and treating each one of them slightly differently. When I started at Spreaker in 2020, there was like this huge focus or obsession, I would call it, with host-read ads, and there still is.
The cult of host-read ads, which I love, that cult has t-shirts. But I do think that it has benefits, and there are 100%. Other ways.
100%. I mean, I was going to say, like, it was an obsession and it still is an obsession to a point as well. And that's great because it can play a really important part of your revenue stream, but it's not the be all and end all. You need to, where's the money in podcasting? I would say find a partner that will work with you, whether that's a hosting platform like Omni or Spreaker, where they will really help you to understand like the different ways you can monetize your content, help guide you and connect you to the right demand sources that you're looking to be connected with to make money. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting, right? We've had several people on the show come on board from a platform background on the monetization side. And for everybody who is wondering what that means, it means, from like a software company side of things, right, of the industry. And what we're seeing in terms of trends is that people who are in those roles at some of those larger companies, which for like the average indie creator or, even mid-sized creator who has an agent, it can be intimidating, right? But what we're seeing in terms of those platforms is really partnership, which is exciting, yes. Right? It's saying like, hey, actually, like, we love the work you're doing. We see the audience. We want to help you monetize it. Here's where we can help you. Here's what we've seen other people do. And how can we partner together so that everybody can make some money?
But it has to be that way, right? Because, I mean, like the larger you are, if you're a huge network or business enterprise level, the chances are you're going to have the resources to hire people to do that for you. You know what I mean? Experts in the area. And so, if we want to keep the podcast industry thriving and growing as it is now, it's kind of the duty of those podcast platforms to partner with the kind of mid-tier to longer tail size podcasters to really like enable them, like you were saying, to be able to make money and grow their podcast. So we've got to do it. And yeah, I think it's a very important part of the industry for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we've really seen across guests of all sizes from all companies in all sorts of roles, whether it's somebody who is very niche specific or who is CEO or owner of a company or is an independent creator who's breaking six figures. There is this feeling of ownership of the podcasting industry, right? Like we all know we're in early days. We're all kind of looking around and we're like, oh, in 20 years, we're going to be like, who's in the room now, right? So I do think that that's a really important aspect. And the support that we see with larger companies that in other mediums aren't as collaborative, like, right? That's true. But we see it in podcasting where companies that have advertising, that have, platforms where they implement advertising, and we'll talk about programmatic in a little bit, but are really on the side of creators. It's not one against the other. It's us against the world kind of a feeling. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
United front.
United front. Exactly. So I want to talk a little bit about how you got into the podcasting industry. But first, I want to dive deep into programmatic because you work on the demand side. And for everybody out there who's like a creator, for our creator listenership, if you work in advertising, skip ahead. But if you're on the creator side, I do want to kind of just break down a little bit what we're talking about because it can be super intimidating, right? So when we talk about programmatic advertising, it is inserted into podcasts in near real time. It's served into the audio, almost how like stocks are traded in microseconds. And Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong here, and I want you to jump in at some point, but you've got two sides of it, right? You've got supply side partner, that's SSP, that's that big acronym. And then you've got DSP, which is the demand side partner. And so obviously when the episode is being played, those two partners talk to each other.
Correct. I mean, to put it, when I explain programmatic advertising to anybody, like no matter what their level is, I would always just say like it's the automated buying and selling of ad spots, basically.
Yeah.
A publisher has an ad spot to sell and the technology, which you just mentioned there, the SSP sends it into the market. The advertisers bid from the DSP and the winning ad plays. And so it's real-time bidding is the important
It's like
part to
stock
note,
trading bidding. Yeah, like it's the same technology.
So similar.
It's so cool.
Very, very good analogy for sure. And like the supply side platform, which is at its core what Triton is, it's the tool that really helps the publishers to create and to sell their inventory and to maximize their revenue. And then the DSP, as you mentioned before, is the platform or like tool, whatever you want to call it, that the advertisers use to access and buy that inventory, the right audience at the right price. And so it's complex and nuanced, but it is actually quite simple when you kind of break it down into those two sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody out there who's like, what are all these acronyms people are talking about? That's what they are. And if you have questions, you can always DM PodBiz. You can reach out to anybody on LinkedIn. And I think, in podcasting generally, we don't want to gatekeep and we want everybody to understand what's going on, even just image wise, right? Like when you're at a podcasting conference, you can tell who the production and creative people are because they're wearing jeans and they're a bit cash and they always know where the good parties are. And then you chat with all the folks that are, maybe on the advertising side or more on the business side, and they're all better dressed and they know where all the parties with the good food are.
The key is to be on both.
The parties that have budget. Yeah. At PodBiz, I
Bring
think
a change of clothes.
Exactly. I keep this suit in my car.
Exactly.
Well, Rebecca, you've had a really interesting and fun career within the podcasting industry. So I want to talk a little bit about that because, obviously you have a background that started out not in podcasting because who's did, right? And then you started with Spreaker.
Yeah, I used to work in fast moving consumer goods and then I left that industry and I went more like digital into like online luxury accommodation or glamping as some people may know it as. And I was at a kind of spot where I was lucky enough to be able to kind of take a step back and go like, I wanted a change of career. And what do I really want to work in? What industry? And so I was pretty adamant that I wanted to do something that I was really passionate about. And at the time in 2020, I was obsessed, and to be honest, still am with listening to podcasts. And so I really did kind of look into that area and that industry. And I was interviewing for multiple different roles. I had 3 different offers. Spreaker was one of them. And I jumped at it. And so that's how I got into the podcasting industry. And probably unusually. And I think like yourself, like I went into the podcasting industry specifically in audio. A lot of people that I work with or know kind of came from the radio side of things and then moved, kind of evolved into the podcasting side, but I'm the opposite way. So my learning curve has been backwards.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think a lot of folks on the platform side and on the advertising side do have a legacy media background in radio. Some don't. Some came or, had like kind of, I want to say like a sabbatical in digital media.
Yes, whatever that means.
Just they did something else, within digital media for a few years in between. But it is definitely interesting. And, in the time that you were with Spreaker, they're a hosting company. They implemented monetization really well in terms of their strategy. And in 2022, they were acquired. And so you were there for that. And
I was.
Spreaker is an independent company. It obviously still operates independently and it has its own identity. But when you have the support of a larger company, there can be some challenges, right, in terms of culture. But when you also have that support, I think that's also what people don't always talk about. What's that transition like from going, because having a platform background myself, I think when you're working for a company that's independently owned, right?
Yes.
There's a little bit more of a bootstrap cowboy vibe, right? Of like, oh, this feature, it seems like something good. Let's build it, right? And then there's less red tape, I guess I would say. And then from there to like literally one of the largest companies in the space.
Yeah. I guess we're like cowboys, but in suits now.
I love it. I love all the sartorial references. So good.
But any merger or acquisition is always a challenge, like that change management piece. But luckily enough, when Spreaker was acquired by iHeart, Spreaker was and still is a highly successful company that in its own right is doing amazing things in the industry and a leader. And so we were left to our own devices, for want of a better word, and still are allowed to be quite autonomous in terms of how we're operating, the speed at which we operate. That really kind of core, like startup, scale up kind of mentality has not left the building. And so, but then we are obviously able to kind of enjoy the perks, let's say, or support that we really get from the parent company. And so that is, that's fantastic. And then when we merged with Triton in 2024, that was another huge step and a really great, to be honest, I think when we were acquired by iHeartMedia, the next question was like, when are Triton and Spreaker going to merge? Because it just made sense.
Yeah.
Triton is an enterprise services provider to the global audio industry. Like if you think audio, Triton is there.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of where you'll find the company. And so it just made sense for Spreaker to be merged. Also, Triton had already acquired a podcasting CMS called Omni Studios.
Yep.
And so Triton has kind of two different podcast CMSs that cater to the industry, like both sides of the industry. If you're going to split the clientele, let's say, in two, one is the enterprise solution that is Omni Studio, and then the kind of more independent podcasters and networks where I came from, which is Spreaker. So it made sense for that to happen. And yeah, the culture has been, there's culture shock and different things like that, but not so much with Spreaker coming into Triton. That's been a really great and very positive experience, I think, at least for myself.
PodBiz is brought to you by Lean & Loaf, our video podcast partner. Because running a podcast is so much work outside of just recording a podcast.
Lean & Loaf handles our entire post-production pipeline, getting everything platform ready. That way we're not chasing files or managing editing timelines every week.
We really recommend Lean & Loaf. It's been phenomenal. We're a two-man team. And so for us, it's been fantastic to have the additional support to focus on the content of the show and the incredible guests we've had on.
And really get down to answering the question that you want to know the answer to. Where is the money in podcasting?
Lean & Loaf is trusted by some of the biggest names in the podcasting industry. So we're in really good company with folks like iHeart, HBO, and Netflix.
If you want to take a load off and take your podcast to the next level, head on over to leanandloaf.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, with Spreaker, you were working on the monetization side, right? And
yes.
And you guys had implemented some really smart tools early on. I remember, just thinking, wow, they're so sharp in terms of how they're implementing a lot of these tools quickly for their creator population. And so what was it like in terms of your role and just the impact that you had? Because obviously Triton has a much bigger impact in terms of going from, Spreaker to iHeart to Triton. in terms of the impact and the kinds of, ad buys that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, from the Spreaker perspective, I started out what I would consider more the supply side, in the sense of I was in charge of leading the team that's called Spreaker Prime Network, which basically focuses on the podcast networks that are hosted on Spreaker
Yeah.
and the kind of larger independent creators. They're still indie to a point, but larger.
Yeah.
And so my role was basically to lead a team of people who were going out and getting more people to come to Spreaker, which, as you mentioned a moment ago, given Spreaker's success in terms of being able to monetize podcasts better than most other podcast platforms in the market, it wasn't the most difficult job to acquire, let's say, publishers over to Spreaker. And so from that side of the supply piece, I got really, really interested in the monetization side of it as well, because I just saw that this medium and the content was so underutilized from a making money perspective. There was so much opportunity there. And so yeah, it was more hands-on, I guess, with like smaller publishers, let's say, and specifically podcasting. The transition that I've made over into Triton is it's not just podcasting, right? It's streaming and other different audio formats, like different emerging formats that we have in audio. And so that's been really interesting. The brands that are buying are bigger. The agencies, the holding codes that we're working with are, very large with huge budgets. And so now I'm running a team, the demand team that I lead of multiple different teams, let's say. And yeah, I love it. It's been fantastic. It's like what I was doing at Spreaker, but on steroids. And then I still have a hand in everything that's going on at Spreaker, of course, because there's some core, members of Spreaker that are kind of OG.
Yeah, the OG club.
Staff,
yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's really lovely to be able to kind of dip into both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's one of those things where, when you have bigger opportunities, you make a bigger impact. So what have you seen in terms of the way ads are bought on a larger scale that differs from maybe more independent or mid-sized podcasts that you started out with on Spreaker? I mean, we had Heather Osgood come on who talks about, how some of these ad buys and sponsorship specifically that's, for a specific show, some of those are 18 months out, right? And so
Yeah.
I always think the larger the budget, sometimes the longer it takes to make that deal.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, one of the trends that I'm definitely seeing with the larger holding codes or with the buyers that just have like larger budgets in general is that they planning, right? So they do definitely buy further out.
Yeah.
And we're definitely seeing a shift, especially in programmatic, from, very specific deals to a more kind of always on approach where we'll be able to provide, a specific package of curated inventory to that buyer, and they're able to tap into it for multiple different things that they want to do, let's say, multiple different campaigns that they have running. And so in a way, I guess that makes it a little bit more hands off at times, where they're able to kind of be a little bit more self-sufficient. That naturally has happened as well with the technology developing too. But yeah, I think it's audience buying has always been kind of the way that the thing that we've focused on as an SSP, and also at Spreaker as well. So that part of it hasn't really changed. It's just the kind of tools, the targeting, the expectation from the buyer side has gotten more sophisticated in terms of what they're looking to target and what they're looking for in terms of attribution and different things like that. And that's just how the industry is evolving for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in historic times, especially within the podcasting industry. It's something where we're all kind of building the ship as we sail it, as an overall industry.
100%.
And
yeah.
I love what you said about always on campaigns, because I think that's what everybody wants to hear, right? This is working. Let's just keep writing the check, keep it going. It definitely has that feeling of like the concept is proved at this point.
Yeah.
And so,
I think so.
It's interesting.
I think so with certain buyers. I mean, we have like in podcasting, we obviously the demand needs to grow, and it is year over year, it's growing, but we still have a disproportionate amount of the amount of people that are listening to audio versus the amount of money that's being spent on audio from an advertising perspective.
Yeah.
And so that is, I think, and these statistics might be slightly out of date, but I think it's like 30% of the adult population of the US actually listen to audio as one of their primary sources of media, and only 3% of advertising budget is spent on audio. So that's obviously, there's a huge disparity there.
Yeah.
And so we still need to work to increase that, but there are believers, let's say.
Yeah.
In terms of
Yeah.
audio advertising, we just need to, and we are constantly on a daily basis. That's
Yeah.
part of what my team does, is pitching it and explaining it, success
Yeah.
stories and connecting people, right? That's what you kind of alluded to it a little bit at the beginning, how connected our industry is and how, important it is for us to kind of support and help each other.
Mhm.
And so oftentimes, like a specific buyer is happy to talk to another buyer in terms of like references and different things like that. And so part of our job and part of my team's job is connecting people to, get more of those believers, let's say, in audio advertising.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times people have been like, do you have a case study?
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
in other industries, you don't necessarily want to get all your clients in the same room, but it is something that we definitely see a bit more in podcasting. I wanted to kind of ask a follow-up on that in terms of what you've seen is the biggest driver to move the needle in terms of allocating budget to podcasting from legacy media.
I think it's testing and hand-holding those tests, let's say. I spoke on a panel at the podcast show London recently about this, where the audience was a lot of buyers in the room, and, they're kind of hesitant, let's say, to get into audio. And a lot of times we see buyers who are buying other forms of media, and they'll say, oh, I'll just allocate, this small amount of budget to podcast, for example, and we'll just see if it works. And oftentimes they do it slightly blind. Like, one of the biggest irks I have is when they use the same creative for, a video or CTV campaign that they and they basically try to reuse it for audio, and it's a different medium. It's a different listener experience.
Yeah.
And so that's, us being able to handhold the buyers and work with them to not just test, but smart testing, and to help them understand that, when you are testing audio advertising, especially in podcasting, it's very dynamic. Like, we can change things, in real time, and adapt things. So just because you try something once as a buyer, and if it doesn't work according to like whatever your KPIs or metrics are, doesn't mean that audio doesn't work for your brand or for the brand that you're representing. That's a hugely important part, I think, of trying to get more buyers invested in audio, is really working with them.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about testing audio in terms of a campaign, right? What are some best practices there that you recommend?
It's really important to understand what it is that you're trying to measure. Like, is it brand uplift?
Yeah.
What are you looking to achieve?
What are your objectives?
With your audio ad?
Yeah.
What are your objectives, for sure? And then make sure that they are obtainable and measurable objectives, let's say, from an audio perspective. Like, if you're going into it thinking that you're going to be successful with trying to measure click-through rate, that's not really going to work very well for you from a podcasting perspective. It's not going to give you the results that you're looking for. And so making sure that your objectives are aligned with the medium, and then knowing what kind of audience that you're trying to target. So obviously the brand has a very specific clientele or audience that they're looking to reach, and work with your SSP, like work with Triton or whoever you're using for wherever you're getting your content from, to really understand what is achievable in terms of the audience that you want to reach, and listen to the recommendations. I mean, a lot of the time these larger brands or agencies don't necessarily have a dedicated audio team. It might be, their digital media team that are buying a little bit of audio, and so they're not usually specialists.
Yeah. This is probably a large educational component that becomes part of your role.
Huge, absolutely huge. And it's one of the things that can cause bumps in the road, let's say, is
well, nobody wants to admit they don't know anything, right? Let's be clear on that, right? Especially, I mean, there's a lot of ego, right, in terms of media, right? Like, as an industry.
Yes.
And then, you've got people who are super experienced and have built, really prestigious careers. And this is a new technology, and they don't want to admit they don't know how it works.
Yeah, because it's also, they think it is so similar in ways, but it's also so different to what they've already been used to. So yeah, I know, showing that kind of weakness, let's say, and I'm not about that. Like, I will ask all of the questions.
There's no emergencies and no dumb questions in podcasting.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. And in terms of tracking those test campaigns, I mean, what are you guys seeing in terms of, what success looks like for a brand?
Again, it depends on what their objectives are. If it's, for example, a brand uplift, like, they'll usually be working with a partner who will be performing a brand uplift study at the same time. And honestly, one of the biggest challenges that we have as the SSP or on the supply side, and as me sitting in a demand position within an SSP, is not getting that feedback from the buyers or the advertisers. So, and understandably so to an extent, but oftentimes you'll find they'll do a test campaign and basically, either they'll renew because it was so successful, or they won't renew because it didn't work. And it's pretty tricky to get the exact answers, let's say, as to what does that mean? What does it didn't work mean? Or what does it mean it did work? And I guess that's what case studies are so helpful for, is when you have that agreement that you're going to kind of be transparent on both sides. But building relationships is one of the most important things that myself and my team do with the buyers and the advertisers, so that we can get that information from them and help them to make improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had a lot of people come on. Adam McNeil from iHeartMedia came on, and he talked about the trust that the brands have to have when they place ads with him. And he said very candidly that if a brand has a bad experience with podcast advertising, they don't think maybe it wasn't a great campaign. They think maybe podcasting advertising isn't great.
Absolutely.
We're all just kind of painted with the same brush. So I think when a lot of people are selling on impressions that are augmented or things like that, it really, that's where things get real controversial. And so, because I think everybody who works so hard to build these relationships, especially on the ad side, is really, first of all, you've got the creators and you're working with them and you want to support them, but also you are a steward of this brand's dollars and you want to get them results, not only so it'll be a successful campaign and they'll re-up, but so that it proves the entire medium that we're all in.
Yeah, more reason to work as closely as possible with where you're buying your inventory from, right? Because that collaboration is it's key.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also want to ask you, in terms of just how things are shifting in the past year, what have you seen in terms of trends from your end?
Yeah, trends. I mean, there's definitely from a programmatic revenue perspective, from a budget perspective, it's very exciting to see more money being spent in podcasting specifically. It's becoming the absolute preference when it comes to audio in terms of what the buyers are looking to buy. And so the budgets are increasing significantly, which is amazing to see.
Yeah. In this economy, yes.
yes, very true. But the CPMs are decreasing. They're squeezing, let's say. They're looking for a better price. Okay. And that's one of the things. It's kind of a key mindset shift or metric change, let's say, that we are kind of advocating for in terms of the way in which we're thinking about how to measure success, let's say, as a podcaster. When I was at Spreaker first, when I started out there, it was all about get the highest CPM, try and, that was the kind
of... Get the CPM up,
Get the CPM up. That was your value. That was what basically showed how valuable you were, was if you could claim to get a specific CPM.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that, while the CPM is absolutely important, especially when it comes to a sponsorship or a host read, or when it comes to guaranteed impressions that you're selling, CPM always has a place and it's really important. But we do need to shift the mindset a little bit into thinking more about the RPM, or revenue that's at the end of the day, right? So how much money can I actually make from my content? And so, at Spreaker, for example, we were able to do some testing on our side where we would have had the mindset of trying to negotiate the highest CPM all the time. And then we played with, or tested is probably a more professional word, but we played with the floor pricing that we had on all of our deals that we had set up. And we saw that very, very clearly, by lowering the floor prices in the majority of cases when it comes to programmatic, that increased demand, or unlocked more demand, and therefore the overall revenue was increased as well.
You're getting a higher yield on your inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's one of those things where,
balance.
you charge less per 1,000 impressions, but you're getting, 50,000 instead of 25,000. So you're making infinitely more money on the back end.
Exactly. And so it's a balance, for sure. And that's definitely a mindset that we still today are educating and advocating to the publishers, because there's a lot of people that are still kind of chasing that high CPM, but actually in the bidding landscape, it's a combination, right, of ad fill, like how much demand you can get at the price you're selling at. And oftentimes tweaking that a little bit and kind of constant testing and monitoring will allow you to unlock a serious amount more of revenue than you were before by like holding fast on a specific CPM floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also speaks to, economies of scale with your audience, right? So for everybody out there in terms of the creator landscape, you may have a specific audience, and also it is the size of the audience. It's both, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
It may be moms in Ohio aged, 35 to 45 who go to Target, and how many of them do you need to reach, a certain monetization goal? I think that that's a really important aspect as well. It's not necessarily one or the other, it's both.
Yeah, it's a combination, and it sounds complicated, but you need to be able to consider all things, and basically like go with a strategy and do what that works best for you in terms of your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the educational piece, it sounds like also you help some of the agencies and brands that you work with build out that strategy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we advise based off of their objectives, let's say. We will definitely advise with regards to targeting or the type of content that they should be targeting. A lot of the time, the buyers straight away will go for like a very specific niche targeting, which tends to very much narrow the scale of a potential campaign. And there's ways to be able to do that without narrowing it down so much. And so it is all about kind of tweaking and, again, I sound like a broken record, but working together in a partnership with those buyers to tweak campaigns. Like the beauty about programmatic advertising as well, specifically, is that because of its dynamic nature, campaigns and deals can be changed in minutes. And so there
microseconds,
tweaks can be made. Yeah, exactly. And so again, to go back to your previous point, like it's not about audio not working, after you have a bad experience, quote unquote. It's about testing and working with a trusted partner. And so, we for sure are hands-on. I mean, it's in our interest. Our goal as an SSP is to get as much revenue for the publishers that are on Triton. And so we do everything we possibly can to make sure that the buyer is able to spend the money that they have, the budgets that they have with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that honing too much on a campaign is a really common choice. I don't want to say mistake, but it is a choice. Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, Rebecca, what would you say is one key move or metric or even a mindset that's made the biggest impact on your podcasting career and the success of, the companies you've worked with, which is the same company, but it has evolved. And also, the clients that you work with?
Honestly, and I kind of touched on this a moment ago, it really is about that overall, the holistic, let's say, approach to your monetization strategy, which means, thinking about, I have this content, it's very important to me, which podcasting specifically is usually like very, very close and personal, let's say, to the creator. And so I have this content. And if monetization is your goal, which it's not everybody's goal, but if it is your goal, how much money and what is the smartest way that I can make money from this content while staying, true to myself, to my podcast, etc. And so that like shift from just focusing, like I said earlier, on a specific CPM and to more of like a how much overall revenue can I make, and learning about the different revenue streams, the different faucets that you can tap into. And like I would even include live shows in that as well. If you're a podcaster and you can make money by getting on stage and doing live shows, I mean, they're quite similar environments, right? From an intimacy perspective, do it. It's really like that holistic monetization strategy is something that it's a mind shift that will change the rate at which you can generate revenue for your show or for your network.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a conversation I feel like we're continuing, or a part of the conversation we're continuing to have here on PodBiz a lot, right? It's that in terms of monetization on the creator side, you've got several products, right? That's your, and maybe they're centralized around your podcast and that's your main product, and other things are kind of offshoots or sub brands, right? Like social media clips of your show or merch of your show or live shows of your show. But sometimes those different media products take on an entire audience and life of their own, and that's okay, right? Just you have to think of it as like it's all going to make you money, and it's okay if it doesn't make the one thing money. If you're making sales on shirts,
books. Books is a huge thing.
books,
I see so many podcasters writing books. Some of them self-published, and some of them actually have a publishing house behind them, and like they're two quite different mediums. You know what I mean? But it works. It works.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're also in this interesting time, especially with TikTok and where things are there, of just people saying, hey, I made this thing, and the crossover and needing to be everywhere in one place, but not needing to be the best in every place.
Yeah, I do think that's something that people can kind of fall, for want of a better word, like fall victim to as well, is trying to do it all.
Yeah.
Because for sure, like there are multiple different revenue streams, let's call them, that you can pursue.
Yeah.
But being a jack of too many trades is maybe not going to
You're going to burn out. You're going to burn out, and you're going to be like, I feel like there should be some sort of like graveyard of abandoned podcasts. You know, it's like,
it's sad.
Oh, what's the tombstone of your abandoned podcast going to say? Like, I took on too many things, you know, or
for sure.
I didn't make it past 6 episodes. I hate editing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things. And we talk about this all the time, right? Podcasters really end up doing it for so long because we love it, right? It's something where, I mean, we've talked to like Michael Osborne, for example, who came on, who has Famous and Gravy. He sold a couple of different shows, or gotten a couple of different shows on networks with PRX, Wondery, that kind of thing. And, you know, one of his shows he made for 3 years until he got on a network. And I think
the dedication is incredible. Like it is a passion project usually to begin with.
Yeah.
But it's like a vocation, I think, to be a podcaster.
It is. I mean, even if you're doing it and you're not monetizing at all, it is kind of a second job, you know? And there is a halo effect, right? Like we have there's been a very big trend in terms of guesting where people look for guests, not because their audience will like them, but because they specifically want to connect with the guest to have them as a client or get in the same room with them.
Sure.
That's been a trend. But I mean, the halo effect in general of podcasting is that, you know, it affects everything else you do, right? In the greater landscape of media, right? And so I do think it's something that people who we see persevere and push past the cringe or past the point of starting out as an amateur or feeling like they don't know what they're doing are people who just do it because they keep loving it, right? Like they do it every single week, or, you know, every single, whatever their episode frequency is. And that in and of itself is going to breed success.
If you're not a celebrity, where you don't come from you haven't gotten a hugely established audience elsewhere that you can kind of transfer or hope to transfer over to a podcast, you nailed it on the head. Like it is something that you have to be, it's a dedication.
You got to put in the hard yards
to have.
And even if you are a celebrity, you got to put in the hard yards. We're seeing a lot of celebrity podcasts kind of flounder if they're not good. Like, you know, you have to be famous and good. You can't just be famous.
Yeah, there's so much more competition these days, which is tricky, obviously, if you're trying to come up in the industry as a creator, but it's also healthy, I think, as well, because it makes us, the listener, demand better quality and better storytelling and all of that. So
I think it breeds more creativity through that like crucible of, you know, what you have to do to be successful.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rebecca, what's something that people don't know about what you do?
Something that people don't really know about what I do is that when we talk about, you know, demand or programmatic advertising, it's a machine, right? That's what people like think. It's an automated machine. It's an automated transaction, let's say. And it is. But when it comes to, you know, real value behind programmatic transactions and making money on audio, it all comes down to relationships and the people behind it, the like daily nurturing, the daily training and explaining, like we talked about earlier, and informing as well, especially from the publisher, both sides, the buyers and the sellers, like explaining what's happening, the evolutions within the industry, within the technology. So that human component is like a huge part of my day to day. And, you know, apart from just the like technology side of it, a huge part of it is a human thing.
It is still a relational industry. Like
totally.
When you're talking about handholding in terms of test campaigns and, you know, that
trust, all of those things.
And the relationships you have to build with agencies, like small test campaign by small test campaign to medium test campaign to maybe we'll run it's like, okay, you know, and you have to keep fostering it and feeding it and taking care of it. Because I think as an industry, we even when the concept is proved and people are getting returns, it's still relational.
Yeah, you got to be there. You got to be top of mind. You've got to be there. Like that human component, I would sometimes say, like takes the business from something that can earn, small dollars or even pennies to it's taken it to be $1 billion business, And so that's not done by machines alone. Let's just say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rebecca, what's an example of something you did or that you've been able to do at Triton that really worked?
Well, there's lots of things, thankfully. I guess one of the kind of area that I would say I'm most passionate about, that I think that we've done really well as a company in, would be, driving quality and improvements in this space. So like Triton is obviously a leader in programmatic audio tech. And so it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that we are the ones at the forefront, kind of making sure that, new quality standards are met. And one of the products that we have, which I think is fantastic and we've done really well with, is Sounder. So looking at like the programmatic quality in technology side from the buyer side, but also the publisher side. For the buyer, like Sounder, it's a content suitability tool, basically.
Yeah.
Someone who works in the Sounder team could explain it far better than I, but like we basically, like Sounder is a product to make sure that content is correctly tagged from a brand safety.
Yeah. You're just making sure like alcohol ads aren't playing on the AA podcast. Yeah.
Well, the Sounder piece is more, for example, on the buyer side. Like, so we wanted to make sure that like buyers know exactly what they are buying and that they can do that at scale. So like Sounder is a tool that allows that to happen. We transcribe the podcast at episodic level, and it's pre-bid, so it's before the episode is even published.
Yeah.
And basically the system tags it correctly. And that's
even if it's tagged incorrectly.
Yeah, so this is on the podcast content. So the podcast episode is transcribed.
Okay.
And then Sounder applies different tags for contextual targeting and scores it for brand suitability and brand safety.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows us to put in place like scores and tags to make sure that content is identifiable for the buyer. So the buyer can then use that targeting in order to make sure that they are getting exactly what they want to buy. And they can do that at scale. And like I said, it's applied at pre-bid level. So it's before the episode is even published, it's transcribed by Sounder and it's tagged correctly so that those tags are there for the buyer to be able to use. In fact, we actually just launched an integration in the trade desk. So the buyer is able to use Sounder contextual targeting on the trade desk, which is a DSP. For anybody, it's one of the largest DSPs out there.
Yep.
And so that's something that's worked really well for us from a programmatic quality technology, let's say on the buy side. And then on the seller side or on the podcaster, publisher side, ad quality, which is what you were mentioning before, which is basically, one of the biggest concerns that publishers, that I've experienced anyway, publishers having when it comes to programmatic advertising is around ad quality. Like, to give a really bad example, like not wanting a butcher's ad to play on your vegan podcast. You know, I could definitely come up with a better
special
example.
On lamb chops. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and that can happen. And so Spreaker actually was where the technology originated, but we built this ad quality technology, which basically it transcribes the ads. So we talked about transcribing podcast episodes before with Sounder. This is on the other side. So it's actually transcribing the ads in real time so that anything that's miscategorized or uncategorized even is corrected in almost real time.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference from a publisher peace of mind, a listener experience, all of that. So those are two things from a buy side and a sell side quality perspective that I think we've nailed in terms of things that we've done really, really well at Triton.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to ask next because we're in an emerging industry and things happen. So what's something that didn't go to plan and what did you learn from it?
Does anything ever really go 100%
Does anything ever really go to plan?
Yeah, there's always an interesting twist every day, I find, in this business. No, but to go back a little bit to what I talked about before around educating the publishers and making sure that we're close to them and that they understand exactly what's happening in the developments that are going. Like, I think it's really easy for us working in programmatic advertising every single day. We're in it and it's moving at 100 million miles an hour. And so it's for publishers are not necessarily in that. There's so many other things like we've touched on that publishers have to worry about in terms of like, never mind creating their content, it's editing, it's everything. And so we really have a duty to kind of consciously educate, train podcasters about the space and what's happening and inform them and empower them to make the decisions that they should and that they want to around their monetization strategy. That's not necessarily something that I can pinpoint to say that it goes wrong. But if we're not on top of that and if we're not mindful of that in every conversation that we have, especially on the supply side, on the publisher side, that can lead to, misunderstandings or mistrust, let's say, for example. And so that is a huge part of like daily mindset we have to have.
Publishers and creators, podcast networks, that's what we're talking about in terms of that supply side.
Yeah.
They have to be vigilant about keeping their content loyal to the audience, right?
Absolutely.
And I do think we see it all the time, right? Where they have to make sure that any monetization that they bring in can't alienate that audience population, because that's, at the end of the day, their bread and butter.
For sure. And like, luckily enough, when you have a CMS or a content management system or hosting platform, whatever you want to call it, wherever your podcast lives, if you have a really good relationship with the platform, if you have good people around you in terms of advising you and that kind of thing, usually, things do go as much according to plan as possible. But yeah, I feel like that's an area, that's a pitfall that can open up, let's say, if we're not, like, I constantly drive that sentiment with my team all the time. Do not take for granted that this podcaster, for example, this host knows exactly what you're talking about. And it kind of goes back a little bit, Norma Jean, to what you said about people being afraid to not admit that they don't understand something.
Oh,
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
In every industry.
It's so prevalent.
Yeah. And so
let's all just admit what we don't know.
Yeah. And I try to ask questions like, explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old, because then I hope that other people are not afraid to also ask that.
And I think it's also, there are like certain dynamics, right? Like people maybe who are more senior, or it's just one of those things where I think some people feel like there's a pressure that everybody thinks they know, and it's okay. I don't know how to change the oil in a car. I don't know how to do that.
Me neither. And and I think that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, we can't all know everything.
We can't all know everything.
Yeah.
That's
and the people
true.
The people I'm most impressed with that I work with, on a daily basis are the people that ask the questions.
Yes.
And because they end up being the ones that know the most, right? Because
this has been such a huge theme in terms of several episodes we've had of late is stay curious, right? How curious can you be? And I think it's that, I think within podcasting, what we've kind of seen is that everybody that I've spoken to within the industry, senior level, gets to a point where they're senior level and they look around and they're like, right, nobody here knows more than I do. And I still am trying to figure it out. Yep. And so I do think it's something where it's super important to just say, hey, we tried this, it didn't work. And I do find that some of the most popular and successful executives within the podcasting industry are people who are like, hey, I tried this. It did not work. I face planted. Here's what it cost me. Here's what I tried. And it is something that we see as things are evolving, right? And I think you had mentioned the technology you guys have in terms of that ad safety for publishers, right? So because sometimes ads can be mislabeled.
Yeah, they can. They can for sure. Luckily enough, because of that specific technology that we have, it's really uncommon.
Yeah.
And from an uncategorized ad perspective, it doesn't happen anymore, which is fantastic because we transcribe the ad, as I said, and then we categorize it correctly. And the miscategorization is dealt with.
Exactly. It had to be developed in real time from somebody saying, hey, there is a meat advertisement for a butcher special on my vegan podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to be completely candid and frank, like, a lot of other platforms, most other platforms don't actually have that technology implemented yet. And so that is, there's so much room for improvement. There's so much room for improvement in the podcasting industry. And so, yeah, I would like to say like that is definitely one of the areas that we lead in terms of technology is the quality piece for sure. Triton has always been of that mindset from a quality perspective is really important. That goes from the buy side and the sell side. So
yeah, and we're building the ship as we sail it. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, Rebecca, if you had to start over today, what would you do differently to grow faster or smarter?
my answer to this is probably a combination between personal and work, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So like for me, seeking out remote work earlier would be something that I would do. And that might sound like a very personal answer because people associate like remote working with all of the perks that it has from a flexibility perspective, from a personal side of things. But actually, like I worked in offices exclusively until 2020, until I started at Spreaker. And I just have found my productivity, my output from a work perspective to just be significantly better since then. And I know that doesn't apply for everybody. It's a very specific type of person.
For everyone working in an office, we know some of you are a little bit more productive in an office environment. But it's also, I do think also it's nice when a company can kind of give people the freedom to say, hey, we're all adults, get your work done. I think that's really nice.
And don't get me wrong, I adore meeting up with like my team and with the wider company, and I love going to events. And like maybe I have this answer and this attitude because I do get to go to so many, different events and meet my colleagues or, go to MLTs in our head office and that kind of thing on a regular enough basis. So it's not like I'm completely detached in terms of being, sitting in a room on my own working all day. So maybe that's influenced my answer. But I just find from myself, I'm just happier and more productive. And I have talk about from a career progression perspective, I have grown faster and stronger, let's say, with remote working than I did in an office environment. And so maybe that just says things about me. I shouldn't be around people.
No, I do think it's something that, it's interesting. There's only one or two demographics that really say they prefer working in an office. And what we've seen is that people who have diverse lives, right? The average work week, the 40-hour work week was created for one man to work 40 hours and support a whole family. And so nowadays people have kids, they have aging parents. We all have things going on, right? And so I do think that, growing up, we all never thought, first of all, we'd work in podcasting because it didn't exist. And second of all, that we'd be able to work from home. Like that was something that maybe somebody who was a professor would get to do on the, in the months where they weren't actively teaching class, or somebody who was, had their own business, or, maybe somebody who did real estate, we get to go to appointments and didn't have to work in an office. But it's something where I think we're both millennials. It's one of those things where, growing up, it's not something where it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to work anywhere in the world and learn a specific industry and get really good at it and have a network. And I see them many times a year at meetings and conferences and still feel like I have an enriching work life and be able to go to the grocery store. If at 2 p.m. I realize oh, it's going to close and whatever. But it's something where I think having a little bit of perspective and I think it allows, not everybody, everybody has their own perspective about this, but I do think it allows for a little bit more flexibility in terms of people's work-life balance as well.
For sure. And you just said about worldwide there, I couldn't do my job if I worked in an office because I'd have to sleep in the office because my role is a global role, right? So working from home allows me to have the flexibility to get on a call at 8 o'clock in the morning with the APAC or the Australia team.
Exactly.
And then
it's a great thing about Europe. We could talk to Asia in the morning. Yeah, we talk to Asia in the morning and we talk to the US in the afternoon. It's the best.
Yeah, but remote work, that allows me to have a global role rather than having to focus specifically on one region. Yeah. And having a global role and working in multiple different markets really allows me to, take learnings from different markets and apply them and test them in others and have that wider, more holistic perspective over programmatic in general across globally. And so that's a huge benefit that I would likely struggle with, let's say, if I was in an office.
It's not even that you would struggle with it. It's that the organization that you work for wouldn't get the benefit of that expertise.
For sure. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, it would be 3 different people in 3 different offices and yada, yada.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca, this has been such a pleasure.
Yeah, I've had so much fun.
Rebecca Dalby, VP of Demand at Triton Digital. We have one last question. What are you most excited about within podcasting?
This might be a controversial answer maybe, but I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the ways in which AI is already is for sure. Obviously, we've seen AI impacting the podcast industry, especially from a creation perspective in terms of workflows. But how AI is going to impact programmatic specifically. You know what I mean? Like obviously the nature of programmatic advertising, that actual transaction is automated, but we're going to see a world where that automation will flow across the whole value chain, let's say. So it won't just be limited, let's say, to the transaction. And Triton, I have a sneak peek into this because Triton's at the helm of the developments happening behind agentic AI agents and that kind of thing in programmatic and how that will work. Because Triton is a founding member of AdCP, which sounds more complicated than it is, but it's basically just a blueprint for how AI agents will transact in digital media. Yeah. And so that is something that I'm really excited to see how that unfolds and develops, because I think it's going to change our industry in a very exciting way. You know, change is good.
I think when AI starts to take away actual work that creators can be creating that's fulfilling, I think that's where it becomes a moral issue. But, you know,
absolutely.
I do think when we're talking about programmatic and the way that automatic auctions are and real-time bidding works in terms of an industry, people are probably very excited about AI, and it's not a moral issue.
No, I mean, it's still going. There's the humans, like I mentioned earlier on about humans being so important, like those relationships will still need to exist. Well, it's just going to help us work faster and smarter.
Exactly.
So it's not going to replace anything in this specific context, because I am very sensitive, let's say, to the topic that you just brought up there about, you know, it replacing jobs that it shouldn't, let's just say. But from a technology perspective where there's already automation in place, it's really exciting to see how much further that's going to go and what it will do in terms of revenue for the podcast industry. So that is something I'm really excited about.
Yeah,
I'm
riveting.
also very personally, on a personal note, I'm also very excited this year because I have a baby coming in October. So that's another
congratulations
exciting thing that's not really to do with the podcast industry, but maybe I'll create a podcast about it.
Maybe, or they will be a future podcaster.
They may, they might.
They may. Well, Rebecca Dalby, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this so much, Norma Jean. So it's been great. Thank you.